Hello and welcome inside a quiet Amalie Arena. Not very often do we get the whole place to ourselves, but here we are, just soaking in the solitude, as Josh Sidorowicz said at 5 o'clock, getting prepared for Game 1 tonight in Madison Square Garden. So why are we here inside Amalie Arena? And that's because we got the watch party. We started off in Sparkman Wharf. We then moved to Armature Works. We then went to Thunder Alley. Now it's rain season, so we got to come inside. But also the stage is bigger as the Bolts are just 4 wins away from clinching their 3rd consecutive trip to the Stanley Cup Final, and they get to do it against an organization we know very well down here, the New York Rangers. And there was a period of time where the Tampa Bay Lightning were called the New York Rangers of the South, or New York Rangers South, however you want to say it. But that's because there are a lot of trades that go on between that organization and this organization. One of the most notable ones was Ryan Mcdonough coming from New York, their captain, coming down here, and he has been an integral part of this team's success. John Cooper last year thinking that if there wasn't a guy named Andrei Vasilevsky, that his name should have been at the top of that Conn Smythe Award for what he does as far as setting the tone, blocking shots. He is amazing on that blue line, and he was actually a part of the Rangers organization back in 2015, the only other time the Lightning and Rangers have squared off in the postseason. That happened in 2015, as I mentioned, in the Eastern Conference Final, just like this year, and that went 7 games. It was a 2-0 win. Alex Killorn scored the game-winning goal in that one as the team advanced to the finals to play the Chicago Blackhawks. As we know, they ended up losing that series. The Bolts did in 6 games. What's interesting is when we talked with John Cooper yesterday in preparation for this matchup, we asked, are there similarities from what we saw in 2015 to now? Can you draw from that experience? And he said, well, it's interesting because our team, when it comes to the core, pretty much all here. Some faces have left, but the Stamkos, Hedman, Killorn, Palat. I mean, Vasilevsky was on the bench during those days. Ben Bishop was the goalie, but a lot of these players were in that environment, know what Madison Square Garden brings when it comes to the postseason. For the Rangers, not so much. I mean, there are a handful of guys, just a small. I mean, Chris Kreider is one of the guys who was on the ice for that series, but you really can't point to too many players who not only were in that series with the Rangers, but also have played that much postseason hockey. So when we're talking about having the upper hand on the Rangers and where the Lightning can really become a force and flex its muscles, I think experience is certainly one of those things we have to talk about. Something else we have to talk about before I go into a couple more of my keys in this series is Brayden Point. We saw Brayden Point skating around this morning inside Madison Square Garden, and we have not seen Pointer in 2 weeks. I mean, we know he's been working out behind the scenes, but publicly, we haven't seen him in quite some time since that injury in Game 7 up in Toronto. So we don't know if he's going to play tonight. We don't expect that. He wasn't skating very fast this morning, certainly still getting his legs underneath him. We'll hear from John Cooper coming up in about an hour or so. Also, we'll hear about Brandon Hagel, who was not at practice this morning, but was at practice yesterday here inside this building. Hagel came out, did a little skating, and then went right back into the locker room. We think Hagel is going to play in this matchup. He is dealing with some sort of foot injury, though, and he's laboring through that, as well as a lot of other players on this team really trying to fight through the playoffs. And we know that postseason hockey is a beast, and players are getting injured left and right. One of my favorite moments at the end of the season is that last press conference we have with the team and the players and asking them who's injured, what injuries they have, what have they been fighting through. We know Hagel's hurt. We know Point is hurt. We know Mikhail Sergachev is dealing with something. He's going to play tonight. But John Cooper is saying that they needed the rest this year more than any other year they have been together. They are banged up, and that sweep was so important for them, not just because you want to get done with it as early as possible, but when you block 80-something shots in 4 games, there's a lot of wear and tear, a lot of black and blues, a lot of bumps, bruises, bones that are fractured, chipped, sprains, whatever you might call it. We know Stamkos took a beating as well in that Game 2 out there in Sunrise, where he went back and forth into the locker room 3 times. So there's a lot that this team is battling through, and they're going to have to move very quickly to get into that sense of urgency. That was something that Corey Perry was talking about this morning inside Madison Square Garden, saying there is a blueprint that they have done, which was successful against Florida. They have to pick back up where they left off, even though they have been on an 8-day break. They ended last Monday. They're suiting up again tonight. They have had 8 days where they have not needed to go head-to-head, squaring off against an opponent, whereas the Rangers, they've been going every other day for the past month. They went 7 games in the first series against Pittsburgh. They went 7 games in the second series against Carolina. That group, they don't even feel like they're supposed to be here. That's sort of the rallying cry. We're just going to go out there and screw it. We've gone through it. We went down 3-1 in that first series. We went down 2-0 in that second series. This is an opportunity that where the Bolts can maybe take advantage of a group that's raw and young, as I mentioned, but also a team that is sort of happy to be here. This is a group that really is starting to make its upward trajectory, something we saw in 2015 with the Lightning when they just burst onto the scene and boom, they were in the finals. Hopefully the Rangers don't pull that off for all of us here rooting for the Lightning, right? But that is sort of the look that this team has, and you can draw the parallels. We'll see what happens, but this is sort of with the Rangers, a group that really has to be on top of their A game to get past the 2-time defending champions, because on paper, I'm not trying to jinx it, I'm just saying the facts. This is the easiest matchup for the Lightning in the playoffs right now, because they had to go through Toronto, they had to go through Florida, and now the Rangers, they're not a high-flying team like those other two. The Bolts can kind of play their structure a little bit more. Even though it was a sweep against Florida, the puck bounced their way. There were a couple of things here or there. Vasi also only letting up 3 goals in 4 games. I mean, that series could have been a lot tighter. So I don't expect it to be a sweep this time around. I expect this to be a very hard-fought battle. And I just want to say one more story on Corey Perry, which is very funny, by the way. So Perry, going back to the Toronto series, he started to get hot, or at least they started to pick up wins, when he spoke with the media before the game. So it got to a point, actually, where members of the media were saying, we don't need Perry anymore. Like, we've gotten the sound from Perry enough. Are there going to be different players showing up? And the Bolts PR team was sort of like, we don't even ask Perry to show up. He does it because he's that superstitious. So, of course, there was Corey Perry talking before the game, and you can get Corey Perry's sound before each and every game as long as the Lightning are playing winning hockey. So that's a fun little anecdote. We know that Victor Hedman is superstitious, probably the most superstitious on his team, but Corey Perry trying to compete with him in that category. Just a couple of other notes that I want to tie a bow on as we feature a preview here of this Eastern Conference final. The Tampa Bay Lightning have struggled with penalties all season long. Okay, this is a team that has always found its way into the box. I don't know why. They've harped on it. John Cooper has dealt with it. It just happens. If they do that against the Rangers, they're going to be in serious trouble. The New York Rangers, their engine is that power play. If you go back to the game here on March 19th, it was a 2-1 playoff-type atmosphere inside Amalie Arena, and in the final 16 seconds, the Rangers scored, pulling out that victory, but they scored because of a late penalty, I believe, on Eric Chernak, and that helped the Rangers get over the hump and pull off the win. You cannot give this power play unit that many opportunities. If you do, they're going to generate those goals. And this team isn't a squad that's going to put up 1,000,000 goals. This isn't like the Western Conference Final, okay? They got 14 goals in that Game 1 affair yesterday. We might have 14 total goals combined in this series, maybe in the first 4 games. I don't know. Igor Shesterkin versus Andrei Vasilevsky is exactly what you want. It's the pitcher's duel. It's the ultimate pitcher's duel. It's like having Clayton Kershaw versus Max Scherzer. As we have the music bumping now, fans here inside the watch party, by the way, they'll be entering at 7 o'clock for the 8 o'clock game. Tickets just $10. You can enter the building. Oh, we're going up and down with this music. You can enter the building tonight Friday. They're most likely going to be doing this throughout the postseason, especially here as we're in the middle of our rainy season. I just want to mention also, we will be live on 10 Tampa Bay at 6 o'clock, breaking down a little bit more of this matchup. Also, I'll have the highlights tonight on Nightside at 11 o'clock. Angela, what time is it? 6:02. All right, when it's 6:05, let me know. We'll start wrapping this up. But one other thing for the Lightning. They have to continue to play their gritty brand of hockey. This team is not as good, again on paper, not as good as the ones we saw the previous 2 seasons when they won the Stanley Cup final. But they are a savvy group. They know exactly what it takes to win. They know what that blueprint looks like. They know how to get it done. They cannot afford to not get in front of pucks. They cannot afford to tiptoe around this team, and they're going to have to get grimy goals against Igor Shesterkin, who is most likely going to win the Vezina this year. We have Vezina versus Vezina winner in Andrei Vasilevsky, and the Rangers understand the problem as well. They got to go up against the greatest goaltender right now in the league, and that's not my words. That's what Igor Shesterkin said in preparation for this matchup. We'll also see a familiar face in Barclay Goodrow. He was part of the back-to-back champion teams here in Tampa Bay. He just went over to the Rangers this past offseason in a trade as the Bolts could not work out a deal to keep him in there. We know how tight the salary cap is, but Barclay Goodrow says about this team, they know how to win. To be the best, you got to beat the best. They're excited for the opportunity in front of them. And when he was asked who he would take and who's better between Andrei Vasilevsky and Igor Shesterkin, he said he would take Shesty. So that's some fighting words. He could have taken the high road. He could have ignored that. So we're going to use the goal horn, by the way, to get me out of here, as we are roughly an hour away from fans trickling in to Amalie Arena, getting prepared for this watch party inside this building, and also the 8 o'clock puck drop in New York, Madison Square Garden. Remember, games 1 and 2 in New York, games 3 and 4 here inside Amalie Arena. Game 3 will be Sunday at 3 o'clock. Game 4 will be Tuesday at 8. And then we rotate every other day, 5 and 6, 5 being in New York, 6 being back in Amalie Arena. And then 2 Tuesdays from now would be Game 7 if we have to address that situation. The latest possible date we can have the Stanley Cup final would be on June 30th, and that matchup would be against the Colorado Avalanche or the Edmonton Oilers. The Avalanche won Game 1, as I just mentioned earlier, 8-6, 14 combined goals. We are going to see a different look from this series. But we're going to wrap it up here. Get prepared for our live show on 10 Tampa Bay. Please follow me at eKlosky WTSP. I'll be giving you updates throughout the series. Have been giving you updates all season long on this team. And you can head over to 10tampabay.com or our free app at 10 Tampa Bay to check out tons of our content. I was able to sit down with Ross Colton one-on-one in an interview to discuss not only his knack for playoff moments, but also what it's like to be on this veteran-laden team as a youngster, just 25 years old. Great stuff, unedited interview in full on our website. Also, you can check in on our web story. You see number 26 behind there? Marty St. Louis, the new head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. The interim tag officially taken off. We're happy with Marty. Marty played his last game in the NHL with the New York Rangers. That game was a Game 7 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, losing to his former club 2-0. Thank you for joining us here, and we are excited to see what happens in this series coming up.